Alright, so it looks like we got a couple things started here. Not much. Our 2D and 3D scene open. Got some sort of environment laid in both of them. And a character brought in that we can move around and show some basic animations for both 2D and 3D. So not a whole lot going on, but a start. So I think now is a good time to go ahead and start putting our objects together that we can then feed into our game writer object. Let me go over this. Into our game writer object, which will actually create a file. So that's over here. We've already looked at that. There has been a change. At some point, I noticed I forgot to set up an attribute for the directory where we're going to write the game. And not sure how I overlooked that one. That's kind of a big deal with writing the files. We need to know where to write it. So by default, it just goes to just a blank string, so it write to the file it's in. But otherwise, yeah, that's kind of important. And I started putting together some interface stuff. Not a whole lot so far, just a new project function to create some folders to work in, quick access to Inkscape and Blender from our work area, and then called it that write game object, and right now that just has a quick test version. So not much there. We can call all these methods. So if I guess I have to call this one first. So I'll just go over to the other thing. Because I also put together, I just used the TK interface package to put together a GUI to start testing the interface with. That way I can run the tests and stuff, and once I decide what package to make the interface in, it'll be ready to go. I guess I could open that real quick. Notepad++. So if we scroll through here, you'll notice there are no functions. All the functions are imported from that interface stuff file. That way it can quickly be moved to whatever the final graphical user interface is going to be. If I run this real quick, Python test GUI, whoop, no, the other way, GUI test1.py. Have this little thing, so not much going on. I'll navigate to this other folder. I've got it just right into the delete folder for now. Obviously, this new project button needs some dialog boxes to come with it to pick names and stuff, but so far it creates some folders for us. Doesn't put anything in them, but the folders are there. I also put a quick access to the 2D and 3D editor. So I figured that'll be important as we get near the final draft, and just making sure to consolidate all the stuff we've seen so far, which I haven't even finished setting that up properly. It just does subprocess.call, so it locks up this GUI whenever that opens. So a little bit more work to do there. So just still early in the testing phases. I can close it now. Is it going to close? There it goes. And included the game writer object, which writes the final version. So the final version of our game will write to the top layer of these folders. Then, yeah, so just getting a start, and now we're ready to add the objects so that we can move the stuff that we've just tested with those 2D and 3D simple character movements into our game writer, and the interface, well, into these two things, because the interface is going to have all the methods like add object, add scene, etc., and put all that stuff together and tell the game writer what to write in the end. One thing I don't want to get too far ahead of us is documentation, because with just two objects, not much to keep track of, but we're getting ready to add several more. So real quick, I decided I would just go with Doxygen to document it. Doxygen knows a lot of languages, which so with Python, we need 2 comment symbols, and then on another comment line to give some sort of description, and object to write a 2D game. Nowhere near the final draft here, just a quick pass on showing the syntax for Doxygen. So right before the method or class or whatever, or up top we can have an overall one, just a quick description, 2 comments signify to the documentation generator this is an important comment, then a description, the basic initialize method, and the main keywords we're going to need, as always with documentation generators, are going to be @param, and Doxygen knows several notations. I always use this one, @param and @return, which obviously the initialize method needs the @return, or @param. And I'll just pass in one for an example here. @param title, the name for the game, the only required argument in the object. Something like that, just kind of a start, nowhere near the final draft, but save that. And Doxygen provides a handy little interface to work with. They call it Doxy Wizard. Obviously we could do all this stuff in command prompt, but having the wizard's kind of nice. Buttons to click on, can save the files and all that. So we have to choose a working directory, which I set one up here to choose. So go to Documents, into our game dev, some documentation, and then I'm going to set up a scratch folder for just the area to work in. All the files it creates and deletes along the way. Stuff to fill out like a name, synopsis, versions. Where's our source code at? We'll definitely need this. That's going to be Documents, Game Dev. Here's the one I was looking at today, or right now. Look in there for the source code. That's the comments just put in here. Where we're going to write it to. In the documentation folder, we'll just add it in here. Next, go ahead and document all entities. Next, HTML. I'm going to leave off the search function for now. Don't need LaTeX, just a basic HTML page. And there's some class diagram generators, which we're getting ready to do a bunch of classes, so that'll pay off then. And I just thought I'd go ahead and start this now and at least get ready for it when we add classes. Start adding our classes and objects. That way it doesn't get away from us, because it can be overwhelming. And then all sorts of finer detail of what we're doing. Options there. And finally, over the Run tab, we just hit Run. And it should just take a second and give us a web page. So every .py file is a namespace collection of objects, if you aren't familiar with that. So it puts it in a namespace, then the game writer. We can go in here and get the documentation for it. I'm not a huge fan of the style sheet, but like always, we can just hit F12, go in here, the elements, and basically it's HTML page, so we can get our IDs and classes and all of that stuff and put together a style sheet, which I happen to already have one that I kind of like, that has the navigation down the left side, a separator, and then most of the other stuff on the right hand side, with a lot of the stuff set to display none, turned off. So I already have a style sheet to replace this basic one. Not a huge fan of that, but so we'll be using this Doxygen for the documentation here. That way it doesn't get away from us, and we have instructions that other people can use. And whoops, minimize. And oh, I guess I might as well show this. over here, I have been working on designing the classes. If I scroll up this way, you'll see there's layers and layers and layers of brainstorming. And obviously, I did not sit down and write this all at once. And I've kind of found it can be helpful to use the pictures and start building up class diagrams and whatnot, describing what needs done, and then think really, time to think really hard. And obviously, I didn't do this all at once, 10, 20 minutes at a time over the course of a week or so. Slowly narrowed it down, and I have some objects here for what's going to happen. So on the 2D game, I think I'm going to move our main loop, that while loop. I'm going to put that into a scene object, and then we can load that. I'm going to pull up the code and point at that real quick. So I was thinking, put this with the game, and then this is what I will call the scene, and create that an object. So there's a scene number, whether or not it's playing, when it's finished, and then some methods to go to other scenes. Basically, to play this scene and then go to other scenes. And the other objects on here, so I set it up, the overriding one, right now I just called that stuff. Might think of a better name very soon, but the basic parent class is going to have X and Y coordinates, a list for sprites, then we load all the sprites into a list and deal with the animations that way. A method to render it, some bounds, and a method to add any scripts if we need them. That was what I was thinking everything should have. Then set up a background thing, which right now, the example we've seen just has the load tiles. So like this loop for displaying the tiles, put that in a method for that sprite. And then the character, some data fields for the speed it's going, whether or not a boolean for if it's moving, the frame for the animation, and the movement, all the things we saw. And same thing over here. Our basic scene will be a subclass of showbase, like what we saw. And instead of putting everything right there, it's going to have the camera and lighting. Then the background stuff, like the land we stand on, stationary things in the background, trees and whatnot, and environments, those will just be models loaded in. And then our character will come down from be a subclass of actor, which is essentially what we did here. It's just going to split it up into its own class. So instead of creating an instance of it, we're going to make a class that inherits from this and then does all this stuff. Controls, I think I'll put into it an array of controls for all the animations, a boolean for whether it's moving, then the move, the rotate and step move like we saw. Get started with that. And just everything we've seen, I think I have a design idea for a class, and I've found that sitting and dragging the images around for these pictures can really help to think it through. And if I start scrolling up, you can see there's been a week and a half, a couple weeks worth of storming that goes on for a minute before I finally settled on this stuff. And so these are the classes we're going to make, and we'll put them together, then add them to the game writer object, and make sure that we have just one click on that little GUI. Where's that at? In here. So we'll put the classes together, this one. Put the classes together, some methods to add those instances of those classes to the game writer, and then with one click, we should be able to write everything that we've got done so far. So we'll get started in that in the next video. See you then.